Okay, this will be the first video on how to use GGPlot to do nice graphics in R. GGPlot is an add-on package, so we'll see the library command coming in here. But before we do any of that, let's just talk about what a good graphic is. Good graphics, I've seen this in several various forms. Follow this anatomy, if you want to think of it that way. The acronym ACCENT. Apprehension. Can you correctly perceive relations amongst the data? Clarity. C for clarity. Can you visually distinguish the elements of the graph? Consistency. Can you interpret the graph based on other graphs that you've seen in the past? Efficiency. Does the graph portray data in the simplest possible way? It's always a little subjective. Necessity. Also sometimes subjective. Are all the elements of the graph necessary? And then truthfulness. Are the data plotted in a well-defined way? Now, we will try and have all of these things show up in every single graph that we make, but this is really just kind of our litmus test for every time we make a graph, is it a good data graphic? So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with a nice clean slate. Here, let's get everything out of there. Nice clean slate. I'm going to load the ggplot 2 library. And I'm also going to load the MDSR, the Modern Data Science with R. It actually is packaged with a textbook, but it has the data set that I'm going to use, so I'm just going to load that library. If you're using a different data set, then don't worry about that. That's fine. And then I'm going to pull in the CIA countries data set. I'm just going to name it CIA. And what is that data set? So let's run this little chunk of code. So that data set has variables from the CIA Factbook 2014, variables such as the country, population, area, oil production, GDP, percent of GDP spent on education, roadways, fraction of internet users, so on and so forth. So it's kind of a cool little data set. The actual data set itself is not really relevant. It's the fact that it's got some great data that we can make plots of. So first and foremost, let's just use base R graphics to make a really simple plot. I want to plot education versus GDP. So I could always come in and just do plot and do CIA $ education, comma, CIA $ what was it, GDP that we're after. So GDP, I'm using tab completion to finish that for me. All right, and if I plot it, and let me zoom that guy up here. Okay, there's base R graphics, right? It's not fancy, but it works. It's really simple to code. Put in the X, comma, put in the Y, close your parentheses, done. It's really simple. But I claim that we can do much, much, much better with GGPlot 2. Not just making it look prettier, but also add a lot of flexibility to the plot. So we're going to build the same basic plot with GGPlot. And here's how it works. GGPlot you think of as a collection of Legos, right? We're going to take the base Lego, like the big mat Lego, then we're going to put Legos on top of that, and once we've built our Lego tower, we can stand back and say, that's a cool statistical plot. So the base Lego for GGPlot is the GGPlot command, and then it gives me all of these helpers. So I'm going to say data equals, notice I'm using an equals, not an arrow, because I'm telling the GGPlot function the default name data is being assigned this thing. So for me it was CIA. And then GGPlot is built on a collection of aesthetics. The word is actually very appropriate. We're just building the aesthetic parts of the plot. In this case I want X to be my education, which that's EDUC. And I want Y to be my GDP. And what I've done now is I've built the base of the Lego tower for this plot. And I'm going to use the plus command because I'm then going to add more Legos to this. So I'm going to add a geometry. Geom is short for geometry, so I'm going to do a geometry. Oops, that's not the one. Geometry underscore, and I'm just going to add a point. And actually that's where I'm going to stop this plot. So I've built the base of my Lego tower, and I've told it I'm going to build points based on these particular aesthetics. So if I do this, Control Enter and run it, I build the same plot that I built in base R graphics, and arguably I built it in a far more complicated way. There was way more for me to code. Now, I also argue this looks nicer simply because the people who built GGPlot have really put a nice job into what the overall aesthetics of a GGPlot always look like. I think this just feels nicer. But yeah, I've done more work to get this plot. So right now you might be thinking, this seems ridiculous. That's more work. But wait. If we stick with the Lego plot analogy, I can add all sorts of things to this plot. Right? I can send more aesthetics into the points, for example. So here, let me do this. So I have some nice, relatively clean code. I'm going to copy that chunk of code. And I'm just in an R script here. Okay, I want to make the size of the points according to the population. So I'm going to send an aesthetic into the points themselves. And I'm going to say size equals, I believe it was pop. So let's minimize this, my environment, pop. There it is. Okay, so all I did was add one more little aesthetic, rerun it, and now I have the size of the individual dots is according to the population that was in my data set. That's actually not easy to do in base R graphics, but this is really simple with GGPlot. Okay, let's now color according to the percent of internet users. So I'm going to send another aesthetic to my points. I'm going to send the color aesthetic. And I believe it was net, oh boy, I forget. Net users. Okay, rerun it. And now I've got even more going on in my GGPlot. Okay, so we should stop and think, does this follow the accent acronym? So I'm going to minimize that guy back down. Let's scroll back up. Can you correctly perceive the relationships amongst the data? Well, let's see. I think we can. Is it clear what we're trying to do? With all the labels here, it's pretty clear. Is this consistent with the way that things have been graphed in the past? Well, things like population being the size of the dot, yes, that's pretty typical. Colors being different categories, yes, that's pretty typical. Is it an efficient way? Well, we could argue back and forth on this one. There might be other more efficient ways to display this data. Maybe, maybe not. Is it necessary to have all of this? Well, maybe not. So maybe I'm breaking one of these rules. Is it truthful? Yeah, I think I'm actually telling the truth with this plot. So I think I'm going to end this video there. I'm going to pick up where I left off in the next video, and we're going to keep doing cool things to this data.